The air in the vast chamber of the Galactic Concorde was thick with the sense of a dozen different atmospheres and a low hum of translators. Representatives from countless star-faring species floated, stood, or slithered in their designated areas, their attention fixed on the central display. It was the final day of the Defense Exposition, a grand show of military strength meant to ensure peace through shared fear. So far, it had been a parade of predictable power. Bigger plasma cannons, thicker neutron shielding, faster sublight engines. Humanity's turn was last. Ambassador Choi Soo-jin walked with calm steps to the speaking platform. She was a woman in her 50s, her black hair streaked with elegant silver, her face a mask of polite composure. Inside, her heart was a drum. The next few minutes would change everything. "Members of the Concorde," she began, her voice clear and steady in the universal feed. "We thank you for this opportunity to share our latest contribution to collective security. We have listened to the discussions on deterrence. We present not merely an increment of force, but a reconsideration of the battle space." Behind her, a holographic schematic shimmered into existence. It showed a warship. It was not the largest vessel ever displayed. That honor still belonged to the Gravnak Star Fortress. But its design was different. Smooth, almost organic lines, devoid of the protruding weapon barrels and obvious shield generators common to Concorde designs. A soft, blue-white glow pulsed along its spine. "This," Soo-jin said, "is the MSS Dauntless." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. The name translated as something stubborn, something that would not break. "Let me outline its primary systems," she continued, tapping a control. The hologram zoomed to the ship's rear. The gravitic shear drive. It does not propel the ship through space in a linear fashion. Instead, it allows for controlled, near-instantaneous repositioning within a local stellar volume. A tactical jump measured in thousands of kilometers, with a recharge cycle of minutes, not hours. The murmurs grew louder. Instant teleportation in a battle? It broke every rule of fleet engagement. Archon Vel, a senior legislator whose body was composed of interlocking geometric crystals, pulsed with a slow, amber light of deep concern. Soo-jin continued, her finger moving to the hull. "Adaptive reactive armor. It is not a passive shell. It is a living matrix. It learns the energy signature of incoming fire and restructures its density and reflective properties in real time to maximize dissipation. It also possesses self-repair capabilities at the nanoscale." A hiss came from the reptilian Cathar delegation. Their entire strategy was based on overwhelming alpha strikes to break enemy shields in one blow. This armor would grow stronger the longer you fired at it. "And finally," Soo-jin said, her tone growing quieter, forcing the chamber to silence to hear her, "the primary directed energy system. We call it the cacophony array." The hologram highlighted a series of shallow ports along the ship's belly. It does not fire plasma, lasers, or kinetic projectiles. It emits a focused beam that disrupts the fundamental binding energy holding a target's atoms together. It ignores conventional electromagnetic shielding, as those shields are designed to interact with energy and matter, not with the strong nuclear force itself. For 3 full seconds, there was perfect, dead silence, then chaos, translator units overloaded, squealing with untranslatable shouts of alarm. The water-bound Uni bubbled violently in their tanks. Archon Vel's crystalline form flashed through a spectrum of colors before settling on a steady, alarmed red. "A weapon of absolute annihilation," boomed the Gravnak delegate, its massive form trembling. "This is not defense. This is erasure. This violates the accords of gradual engagement," shrieked the avian Ceridian. "There is no warning shot with such a thing. No damage drive, no life pod warning. One hit and a ship is dust." Sujin stood firm, holding up a hand. It is a weapon of last resort. Its power requirement is immense. Its use is for existential threats only. The Dauntless is a shield, the sharpest and strongest ever forged, to protect not just humanity, but all Concord signatories. But the arguments crashed over her. You have made war clean for you, and impossible for anyone else. This ends the balance of power. No single species should hold such a capability. From the bridge of the real MSS Dauntless, hidden behind the moon of the exposition world, Captain Kim Jun watched the feed on the main viewer. He was a man with a calm face and eyes that had seen decades of deep space. He listened to the fear, the outrage. "Reaction is as predicted, Captain," said his first officer, Commander Park Mina, standing stiffly beside his chair. Her voice was tight. She was a woman of sharp angles and sharper discipline, her uniform perfectly pressed even here, in the hidden void. "Predictable, but still disappointing," June replied, his voice a low rumble. "They see only the knife, not the surgeon's hand that holds it." In the engineering pit below, Chief Engineer Lee Dae-hyun scowled at his own monitors, showing the ship's perfect readiness status. He was a man who spoke more to machines than people, his hands permanently stained with a bit of lubricant. "They're scared of the math," he muttered to his deputy. "Scared because for once, the equations aren't on their side. This isn't magic. It's just better physics." On screen, Archon Vel had taken the floor, his light patterns demanding order. Ambassador Choi, his translated voice was cold, logical, and utterly grave. "This vessel, it does not fight. It negates. It does not engage in combat. It ends the very concept of a fight before it begins. You have not created a new piece on the game board. You have created a hand that can sweep the board clean." Sujin met his crystalline gaze. "We have created a guarantee, Archon. A guarantee that no species, inside the Concord or out, can commit atrocity without facing immediate and total consequence. Is that not the ultimate deterrence? The ultimate deterrence is mutual assured survival, not unilateral assured destruction." Vel countered. "This machine places your species in a position of ultimate judge. That is a burden no one should carry and a power no one should trust." The session devolved into procedural chaos, calls for emergency votes and committees. The exposition was over, shattered by humanity's presentation. The Dauntless had not fired a single shot in anger, yet it had already scored its first. Devastating victory. It had shattered the galaxy's sense of military security. Captain Kim Jun switched off the feed. The bridge was quiet, the soft beeps of consoles the only sound. "Stand down from alert status," he ordered, "but keep the sheer drive at readiness. We are now the most watched and most feared object in known space. We will act accordingly." He looked at the image of his ship on the tactical screen, a graceful, deadly sliver against the stars. They had wanted to show a new tool for peace. The galaxy had seen only a new reason for terror. The war for perception, it seemed, had just begun, and his ship was the battlefield. The political storm was raging. News channels across the Concord debated, condemned, and fearfully analyzed the specs of the Dauntless. On Earth, there was pride mixed with anxiety. In the halls of power, Ambassador Choi Soo-jin fought an exhausting battle, arguing, clarifying, and assuring. The Galactic Concord was a piece built on a delicate balance, and humanity had just dropped a stone the size of a moon into the pond. Captain Kim Jun kept the Dauntless at its hidden position. The crew trained, simulated, and waited. The mood was tense. They were the crew of the most advanced ship in history, but they felt like pariahs. Commander Park Mina ran drill after drill, her voice never losing its crisp edge, pushing them to perfection. She knew their every move would be scrutinized. Chief Engineer Lee Dae-hyun was constantly fine-tuning his systems, muttering about theoretical politicians who didn't understand reactor harmonics. The ship hummed with quiet, contained power, a caged predator. The alert that changed everything was not a political summons. It was a shrieking Priority 1 distress beacon, broadcast on all Concorde emergency channels. It came from Ceridia, a core world of the avian Ceridians. The message was frantic, broken by static and the sounds of explosions. Crawl assault fleet. Bypass the frontier. Orbital defenses failing. Bombardment of cities. We are being harvested. Any Concorde force, assist, please. The crawl. The word sent a chill through every species. They were a reclusive insectoid race from the galactic rim, hyper-aggressive and biologically driven to consume all resources of a world, including its inhabitants. They were the boogeymen, the reason for the Concorde's collective defense pact. Their technology was different, based on bioorganic ships and corrosive weaponry. They had never struck so deep into Concorde space before. On the Gauntless Bridge, the tactical plot lit up. The main Concorde fleet was weeks away, responding to a feint on the other side of the sector. Only a handful of local Ceridian defense vessels remained, and they were being torn apart. Captain June watched the data stream. He saw the estimated casualty projections, the sheer speed of the crawl advance. He looked at Park Mina. Time to Ceridia at maximum conventional thrust? 14 hours, Captain, she said, her face grim. By all models, Ceridia will fall in 6. A private encoded channel blinked on June's screen. It was Ambassador Choi. Her composure finally cracked, lines of stress visible on her face. Captain, the Concorde Defense Council is in emergency session. They are debating. Debating what, Ambassador? The Crawl are not debating. They are debating the legal and strategic implications of authorizing the Dauntless to engage. Archon Vel's faction argues that deploying it sets a catastrophic precedent. And it is exactly the scenario they feared. June's jaw tightened. So they would let Ceridia burn to make a political point? They are trying to rally other forces, but... Su Jin trailed off. On the main bridge viewer, a live feed from a dying Ceridian satellite showed the Crawl dreadnought, a monstrous spiked hive of organic metal, raining glowing pods of acid onto a glittering city below. The sound was turned off, but the silent destruction was worse. June made a decision. It was not a military decision. It was a human one. Ambassador, please inform the Council that the MSS Dauntless is responding to a lawful distress call under Concorde Charter. Article 1. We are acting to preserve life. We will transmit engagement data in real time. They can watch the precedent unfold. He closed the channel before she could argue. Mina, plot a sheer jump to the edge of the Ceridia system. Maximum tactical readiness. Daehyun, I need everything you've got. Lee Daehyun's voice crackled back. The sheer drive is singing, Captain. They won't see us coming. The order went out. Battle stations were manned. The quiet hum of the ship deepened into a powerful thrum. On the bridge, June felt the strange non-motion of the gravitic shear. There was no lurch, no inertial strain. One moment, the star field on the viewer was of a quiet moon. The next, it was the blazing orange star of Ceridia, and the panicked chaos of the battle filled the tactical screen's dot. It was worse than the reports. The planet's orbital rings were shattered. 3 Ceridian cruisers were drifting, holed, in spewing atmosphere. The Crawl dreadnought loomed like a cancer, surrounded by a swarm of smaller, faster hunter ships that were picking off the remaining defenders. Multiple hostile contacts. They've seen us. Park Mina called out. Adaptive armor online. All defensive fields at maximum. Launch fighter screen, Lieutenant Kong's squadron. Keep the hunters off us, June said, his voice calm. Plot a sheer microjump. Put us here. He marked a point on the holographic plot, not in front of the dreadnought, but directly amid its swarm, between it and the planet. Captain, that's inside their effective weapons envelope. Point-blank range, Mina said. They expect a standoff duel. We will not give them one. Execute. Again, that silent, universe-bending shift. The crawl swarm outside the viewport vanished, replaced instantly by the terrifying, pitted landscape of the dreadnought's hull, so close they could see the bioorganic pulses of its energy conduits. Alarms blared as 100 crawl weapons, both energy and biological projectiles, immediately focused and fired on the sudden human intrusion. The bridge lights flickered as the Dauntless shuddered. Adaptive armor is engaging. Learning signatures. Dissipation at 87%. Minor hull heating on decks 5 and 6. Daehyun reported, his voice focused. Their plasma is nasty, but the matrix is adapting. Corrosive projectiles are being contained and ejected. Focus fire on the dreadnought's primary weapon nodes. Standard batteries only. June ordered. The Dauntless's conventional lasers and plasma cannons fired, precise and powerful. They scarred the organic hull, bursting weapon sacks and conduits. But the dreadnought was vast. It began to turn, like a monstrous beast trying to crush a stinging insect on its back. A new, massive orifice opened on its underside, glowing with a sickly green light, a world-killer weapon, charging to finish the planet below. Captain, they're ignoring us for the planet. That weapon is charging. Mina shouted. June looked at the tactical plot, at the millions of lives on the surface below. He thought of the debates, the fear, the accusations. He thought of Archon Vel's words. A weapon of absolute annihilation. Lock the cacophony array on that weapon's energy core, he said, his voice flat. Minimum dispersion. Surgical strike. A low, building whine filled the ship, a sound that vibrated in the bones of the crew. On the underside of the Dauntless, the array ports glowed with a strange, twisted light. Firing. There was no brilliant beam. A shiver in space, a blur of distorted color, leapt from the Dauntless and touched the glowing orifice of the crawl ship. The effect was not an explosion. It was a silent, rapid unraveling. The green light winked out. Then the entire weapon assembly, and a large section of the hull around it, simply disintegrated. It didn't blow apart. It fragmented into a cloud of inert, microscopic dust that drifted away. A perfect, clean hole was punched right through the heart of the biological warship. The dreadnought went dead. All energy readings flatlined. The remaining hunter ships, their hive mind connection to the mothership severed, stopped their attacks. They drifted for a moment, then, as one, turned and fled towards the system's edge. The bridge of the Dauntless was silent. The entire battle had lasted less than 7 minutes. On the viewer, the feed from the Ceridian surface showed people looking up at the sky, where the terrible shadow was now a dead, hollow shell. The silence was broken by a faint, rising sound, not of alarm, but of cheers. Transmitted from a surviving city. Park, Mina let out a slow breath. All hostile contacts have ceased aggression. Ceridian defenses are reporting. Relief. Lee Daehyun's voice came over the comm. Adaptive armor performed at 98% efficiency. Learned and stored 17 new weapon signatures. The sheer drive is recharging. The cacophony array is at 12% capacity. It worked, Captain. Just like the math said. Captain Kim Jun stared at the drifting carcass of the dreadnought. They had one. They had saved a world. But as he watched the strange, non-explosive debris field expand, he felt no triumph. He had shown the galaxy exactly what they feared. He had used the unthinkable weapon. He had proven its horrifying efficiency. The political storm before was nothing. The real storm he knew, would begin now. They were no longer just a new ship with scary specs. They were the crew who had used it. The galaxy had watched a new kind of war, and it had lasted 7 minutes. The silence on the bridge of the Dauntless did not last. The comms systems, which had been focused on the battle, were now flooded. Priority channels from the Ceridian government, overflowing with gratitude and shock. Official queries from the Concord Defense Council, their tones carefully neutral. And thousands of civilian and media requests from across the galaxy, all wanting to see, to understand, to accuse. Captain Kim June ordered all non-essential channels muted. He looked at the tactical screen, now showing the wounded but saved planet below, and the ghost-like remnants of the Krull fleet scattering. Commander Park Mina was already coordinating with the remaining Ceridian ships, offering aid and damage assessments. Her voice was professional, but her shoulders were tight. "Bring us into a high, stable orbit over Ceridia Prime," June said, "and get me Ambassador Choi on a secure line." The face that appeared on his private screen was pale. Choi Soo-jin looked as if she had not slept. "Captain June," she said, "you have saved millions of lives today. The Ceridian Arch-Chancellor is calling you the Winged Sword. Their gratitude is boundless." "But," June said, knowing the word was coming. "But," Soo-jin confirmed, her expression turning pained. "The council session is in an uproar. Archon Vel has the floor. He is not condemning the rescue. He is condemning the method, the feed from the battle. They have analyzed it. The adaptive armor, the micro-jump, and the cacophony strike. They are calling it a Ceridia incident, not a battle. An incident." June felt a cold anger settle in his stomach. An incident where the aggressor was stopped and a planet was saved. "To them, that is not the point," Soo-jin replied. "The point is that you fought a Krull dreadnought, the most feared ship in their arsenal, and you did so without risk. Your ship was never in real danger. Their weapons became less effective the longer they fired. You ended the conflict with a tool that ignores all known defenses. Vel's argument is that you did not engage in warfare. You performed a clinical dissection. You have rendered the very concept of a fleet action obsolete. You have made every other warship in the galaxy a museum piece." Back on Earth and in human colonies, there were celebrations. News streams showed the people of Ceridia weeping with relief. But in the halls of the Concord, a different narrative was heartening. 2 days later, the formal document was filed. The motion of strategic arms prohibition. It was broadcast galaxy-wide. Archon Val, his crystalline facets catching the light, spoke with grave, logical clarity. "The action at Ceridia proves the danger, not the value, of this technology," he intoned. "What we witnessed was not a victory for the Concord, but a victory for a single, unchallengeable weapon. Such a state of affairs is inherently unstable. It invites preemptive attack out of fear. It stifles mutual defense, because what is the point of allies when one possesses an absolute solution? Therefore, this motion calls for the immediate decommissioning of the MSS Dauntless, the sealing of all data related to its core systems, and a permanent ban on the research, development, or deployment of gravitic shear, adaptive reactive armor, and molecular disruption weaponry. On the Dauntless, the crew watched the speech in the mess hall. The mood was funereal. Lieutenant Kang Tae-shik, the brash fighter pilot, slammed his fist on the table. "We saved their feathered backsides, and this is our thanks? They want to put us in a scrapyard." Chief Engineer Lee Dae-hyun sat staring into his coffee. "They want to ban physics," he muttered. "They want to pass a law that says E does not equal mc squared if it makes you too powerful. Idiots." Commander Park Mina watched silently, her face a mask. "It is a logical political move," she said quietly. "We are not just a ship anymore. We are a problem. Captain June received the official order from the Concord Defense Council. It was not a demand to decommission, not yet. It was a summons. The Dauntless was to return to the Concord Central System, to be placed in a neutral dock pending the outcome of the vote on the motion. It was to make its journey using conventional drives only. The shear drive was not to be activated. The journey will take 3 weeks at conventional speeds, Parkmina reported. They want us in a cage, June said, and they want everyone to watch us crawl into it. The trip was long and tense. The Dauntless was like a magnificent hawk with its wings clipped, moving at a snail's pace compared to its true ability. They passed through systems where other Concord ships gave them a wide berth. They were no longer comrades in arms. They were objects of fear and suspicion that Ambassador Choi Soo-jin fought a desperate, lonely battle in the political arena. She argued for regulation, for oversight committees with human and Concord members for controlled use. She was shouted down. The fear was too raw. The image of the Crawl dreadnought silently coming apart was too fresh. The older, powerful species saw the end of their dominance. The weaker species saw a new, unassailable master. You don't understand, Soo-jin pleaded during one session. This technology exists. Banning it will not uninvent it. And what if the Crawl, or something worse, develops something similar? Will you then beg for the Dauntless to come save you again? Archon Vel responded coolly. Then we will face that threat with the courage and sacrifice of a united galaxy, not with a single terrible weapon that reduces war to a button pressed by one species. Some prices are too high for safety. When the Dauntless finally arrived at the central system, it was directed to a remote docking anchorage, far from the bustling civilian ports. It was a place for quarantined ships, for vessels under dispute. The crew felt the shame of it, that the vote was scheduled for the next day. Captain June granted shore leave on rotation. Few of the crew went. The atmosphere on the Concord station was cold. Humans were avoided or stared at with wary eyes. June spent the final hours before the vote in his ready room, reviewing the Ceridia engagement for the 100th time. He saw the efficiency. He saw the clean, surgical horror of it. He understood Vel's fear. But he also saw the cities that still stood, the lives that continued. A personal, encrypted message arrived. It was from Ambassador Choi. It was brief. The numbers are against us, Captain. The motion will pass. I have failed. Prepare your crew for the boarding and impoundment teams. They will arrive after the vote is formalized. June sat back, the weight of it all pressing down on him. They would take his ship. They would tear it apart, study it, and then lock it away. His crew, the best and brightest, would be scattered. Lee Dae-hyun's life's work would be dismantled by committees. He walked onto the quiet bridge. The night shift was on duty, the lights low. The blue-white glow of the core systems pulsed gently. This was not just a machine. It was the work, the hope, the terrifying genius of his people. And tomorrow, the galaxy would declare it illegal. He put a hand on the back of his command chair. The viewport showed the glittering sprawl of the Concord station, a symbol of unity that was now rejecting the very thing that had saved one of its own. He had followed orders. He had saved a world, and it had brought them here, to a silent dock at the edge of legitimacy, waiting for the axe to fall. The night before the vote was the longest of Captain Kim June's life. The Dauntless hung in its isolated dock, a silent and watched prisoner. The crew moved through their duties like ghosts, speaking in hushed tones. The celebration from Ceridia felt like it had happened in another lifetime. Now, they were criminals waiting for a sentence. Ambassador Choi Soo-jin's final message had been clear. Defeat was certain. June had begun the grim administrative work of preparing for decommissioning. Inventory logs, system access codes, crew transfer protocols. Each form he filled felt like a betrayal. Commander Park Mina worked beside him, her sharp efficiency now turned to the sad task of dismantling their own command. Chief Engineer Lee Dae-hyun had locked himself in main engineering, refusing to acknowledge the orders. Lieutenant Kang Tae-shik and his pilots sat in their ready room, not training, just staring at the walls. The vote in the Grand Concourse began at morning cycle Standard Galactic Time. The proceedings were broadcast everywhere. On the bridge of the Dauntless, the senior staff watched on the main viewer, their faces pale in the screen's light. Archon Vel made his final logical argument. We stand at a precipice. To allow this weapon is to accept a future where conflict is decided not by the courage of many, but by the cold calculus of a single machine. We choose a galaxy of shared risk, and therefore shared peace. I urge you all to vote for prohibition. The voting commenced, each species casting its tally. The numbers scrolled on a side screen. As predicted, the votes for the ban mounted rapidly. The Grovnuk, the Caithar, the Uni, the Ceridians, after much public anguish, voted yes as well. Their ambassador expressed eternal gratitude to the humans, but also a deep, fearful conviction that no one should hold such power. It was the final symbolic blow. Ambassador Choi Soo-jin sat in the human delegation booth, her head held high, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, watching the inevitable unfold. Then the lights in the concourse dimmed. Not the viewer on the Dauntless, but the actual lights in the vast chamber. A deep, subaudible hum vibrated through the station, making crystals tremble and water ripple in tanks. Every personal communicator and data pad in the chamber emitted a sharp, static screech and then went blank. On the Dauntless, the tactical console lit up like a supernova. Alarms blared, different from battle alarms. These were priority hazard warnings, coming not from the station, but from the Concorde's deep space monitoring network. They were being broadcast on every frequency, overriding all other signals. What is happening? June demanded, leaning forward. Park Mina's fingers flew over her console, her professional mask slamming back into place, receiving a cascade of emergency beacons from the Hyeran system, and the Taral Belt, and the Lorith Void. Multiple signals. It's a general invasion alert. The main viewer flickered, and the vote tally was replaced by a chaotic string of sensor data and broken distress calls. A visual came through. It showed a Concorde patrol frigate, a modern and capable ship, firing its plasma beams into a swirling, nebulous cloud of dark energy and violet light. The beams passed through it harmlessly. Then the cloud enveloped the frigate. There was no explosion. The ship's lights simply went out. Its hull turned dark and inert, as if every bit of energy had been sucked from it. It drifted, dead. A new voice came over the Galactic Emergency Channel. It was the head of the Concorde Science Directorate, her voice shaking. This is a general alert to all Concorde forces. We are under attack by an extra-dimensional entity. Designation: Void Weaver. Our weapons have no effect. Their nature is energy-based, non-corporeal. They are draining stellar bodies and all artificial power sources in their path. Hyeran Prime is already falling dark. All vessels are ordered to disengage and retreat. Repeat, do not engage. We cannot fight them. The Grand Concourse was in pandemonium. The view on screen showed representatives rushing, images of the dead frigate playing over and over. Archon Vel stood motionless, his crystal body reflecting the chaotic flashes of light. On the Dauntless, the crew watched, stunned. The political crisis vanished, replaced by a primal, existential dread. Captain June's personal cum buzzed. It was a direct, secure line from the Concorde Defense Council, bypassing all protocols. The face that appeared was not Ambassador Choi. It was Archon Vel himself. The serene logic was gone from his translated voice. It was strained, urgent. "Captain Kim June, you see the situation." "I see it," June replied. "The Void Weavers are a myth, a legend of the old species. We believe them gone. Their very structure is incompatible with our physics. They exist as coherent energy matrices, conventional force, plasma, kinetics. They are like throwing stones into a fog." June understood. But the cacophony array does not attack matter. It attacks the binding force that holds matter together. At its core, it attacks structure. "Yes," Val said, the word heavy. "Your weapon is the only one in all our arsenals that theoretically operates on a principle that could disrupt an energy matrix. It is a terrible weapon against ships. It may be the only weapon against this." The meaning hung in the air. The galaxy needed the very thing it had just voted to ban. The motion of prohibition. June started. "Will be tabled indefinitely by emergency decree," Vel said swiftly. "But that is politics. Reality is in the Hieran system. The Void Weaver swarm is there, and it is moving toward the densely populated core. A Concord armada is gathering to make a stand, but they will only be a delay, a sacrifice." "What are my orders?" June asked, his voice flat. "You are not ordered. You are requested. As the commander of the only vessel with a possible chance of affecting this enemy, will you go? Will you use your overwhelming ship to try and stop an overwhelming threat?" June looked away from the screen. He looked at Park Mina, at his bridge crew. He saw the fear in their eyes, but also a flicker of something else purpose, returning. They were not prisoners anymore. They were the only hope. "We will go," June said. "You have the gratitude." "Of the Concord," Val said, and for the first time it sounded genuine and desperate. The connection cut. June stood up. "All hands, battle stations. This is not a drill. Mina, plot a sheer jump to the edge of the Hieran system. Maximum recharge sequence. They Hien. I need every system at absolute peak. We are going into an environment we do not understand against an enemy we cannot conventionally fight." The Dauntless came alive. The despair of the past weeks was burned away in the furnace of a new and terrible urgency. The crew ran to their posts, their training taking over dot as the ship powered up. Another message arrived, text only, from Ambassador Choi Soo-jin. It said, "They watched you save one world and called it a crime. Now they ask you to save them all. The weight is unfair. But you are all we have. Good luck, Captain." The gravitic shear drive began its spooling sequence, the sound rising to a hum that vibrated in the teeth of everyone on board. Captain June settled into his command chair. The viewport showed the distant stars of the Hieran system, now a battlefield. They were not going to a fight. They were going to a trial of annihilation, to face a nightmare with their own nightmare. The ship shuddered, not from weapons fire, but from the bending of space itself. Then the quiet dock vanished. The Dauntless was no longer a prisoner. It was an arrow, shot into the heart of the dark. The starfield resolved from the blur of the sheer jump. The Hieran system was a graveyard painted in silent, terrible colors. The primary star, a vibrant yellow sun, was marred by a pulsing, bruise-like patch of darkness where a Void Weaver entity was feeding, its light dimming as they watched. The space between planets was not empty. It swarmed with the nebulous forms of the invaders' shifting clouds of violet and black, shot through with arcs of hungry energy. And scattered among them, like broken toys, were the hulks of Concord ships. Grovnut battle plates, Ceridian cruisers, Cathar raiders. All dark, all dead. Not destroyed, but emptied. Multiple contacts. Everywhere, Commander Park Mina reported, her voice tight. Reading zero energy signatures from all Concord vessels. The Void Weavers are ignoring them now. They're concentrating on the star and moving toward the inner world. On the viewer, the gas giant Hyaron 4 was already shrouded in a veil of the entities, its colorful bands turning dull and gray. They drained the big energy sources first, Captain Kim Jung murmured. Then they moved to the next. He saw the tactical plot. The last functional Concord force, a ragged assembly of ships from a dozen species, was forming a desperate defensive line between the swarm and the life-bearing world of Hyaron Vi. Their weapons flashed, firing volleys of plasma and kinetic rounds into the advancing fog. The shots passed through with no effect. As they watched, a violet tendril lashed out from the main swarm, brushed against a Grovnak ship, and the massive vessel's lights and engines died instantly. "They're being slaughtered for no gain," Parkmina said, horror cutting through her discipline. "Hail the Concord fleet. Tell them to fall back." "To disengage," June ordered. The response from the Concord commander, a veteran Ceridian, was frantic. "Fall back to where?" "Our weapons are useless. If we do not hold them here, Hyaron 6 dies." June understood. This was the courage and sacrifice Archon Vel had spoken of. It was a noble, tragic, and futile gesture. Chief Engineer, Analysis. "Now," June called. Li De Hyon's voice came back, strained but focused. "The cacophony array is designed to disrupt atomic bonds in physical matter. These things, they're not matter. They're structured energy. The principle might work, but we have to tune it. It's like trying to use a scalpel on a cloud. We need a wider dispersion, adjust the frequency to match their energy signature. But we don't have their signature yet. How do we get it?" June asked. A new voice cut in. Lieutenant Kang Tae-shik from the fighter bay. "Captain, send us out." "Your weapons are even less effective, Lieutenant." "We're not going to shoot it, sir," Kang said, a wild, reckless edge in his voice. "We're going to poke it. Up close. Get your sensor readings. We'll draw a tendril out. Let it chase us. Your big scanners can get a read from a close pass, right?" It was a suicide mission. The fighters had no adaptive armor, no protection against the energy drain. One touch and they would be dead in space. June hesitated for only a second. He looked at the dying fleet on the screen. "Do it. One pass only. Get the data and get clear." 3 human fighters, led by Kang Tae-shik, shot from the Dauntless's bay. They were tiny, buzzing insects heading for a storm. They dove toward the edge of the swarm, weaving through the dead hulks of Concord ships. As they neared the shimmering violet boundary, Kang fired a short burst of his lasers into the fog. The energy was absorbed without a ripple, but the provocation worked. A tendril of dark energy peeled off from the main mass and surged toward the fighters. "It's fast." "Oh, it's fast," one of the pilots yelled. "Evasive pattern Delta. Lead it toward the Dauntless's port side. Give the scanners a clean shot." Kang ordered, his fighters spinning wildly. The tendril pursued, a serpent of nothingness that drank the light around it. It closed the distance rapidly. On the bridge of the Dauntless, Parkmina watched, her knuckles white. "Getting the scan, now. Energy signature pattern is locked. Feeding it to engineering. Recall those fighters." June barked. The fighters pulled up hard, but the trailing Voidweaver tendril was faster. It lashed out, the tip of it brushing the wing of the last fighter. The craft's engines instantly sputtered and died. All its systems went dark. Pilot Kim is down. "No ejection, no beacon?" Kang shouted. "Sheer jump now. Micro jump 10 kilometers starboard." June commanded. The Dauntless vanished from its position and reappeared a moment later, the pursuing tendril lashing through empty space where it had been. It recoiled, seeming confused by the spatial anomaly. In engineering, Li De Hyan worked furiously. I have the frequency. Retuning the array. It's a massive power drain. We'll get one, maybe 2 shots at this setting before the core needs to recycle. One is all we need to test, June said. Target the tendril we isolated. Minimum power. The strange, bone-deep whine of the cacophony array filled the ship again, but the pitch was different, higher, more piercing. A pulse of distorted reality, invisible to the naked eye, shot toward the isolated Void Weaver tendril, where it struck the coherent cloud of energy. Frayed, it didn't explode. It unraveled, like a knot coming undone. The violet light scattered into harmless, fading sparks before winking out entirely. A cheer started on the bridge, but died in everyone's throat. The main swarm reacted. It didn't feel pain, but it perceived a threat. The entire cloud shifted, turning away from the Concord fleet and the planet, coalescing its countless forms into a single, massive wave aimed directly at the Dauntless. They're all coming for us, Parkmina whispered. Daihayan. Can you widen the dispersion? Make it a field, not a beam? June asked quickly. I can, but it will take every ounce of power in the ship. Weapons, thrusters, life support on the reserves. Everything into the array. We'll be a sitting duck for a full minute after. 1 minute. An eternity in a battle. They would be adrift, powerless, in the middle of an enemy that killed by touch. June looked at the tactical plot. The Concord fleet, seeing the swarm shift, was now rallying, moving to interpose themselves between the Dauntless and the advancing doom. It was a gesture. Their weapons were useless. They would die as shields. Do it, Captain Kim June said, his voice calm and final. Mina, order the Concord fleet to scatter. They are not to die for us today. Lieutenant Kang, get your remaining pilots clear. Daihayan, give them everything. The orders were given. The Dauntless turned to face the oncoming tidal wave of dark energy. The ship's internal lights dimmed as power was ruthlessly diverted. The thrum of the engines faded to silence. Only the rising, screeching whine of the overloaded cacophony array filled the void. The swarm descended, a wall of hungry night. Fire, June said. There was no visible blast. From the Dauntless, a sphere of warped space and rippling distortion expanded outward in all directions, silent and terrible. It met the leading edge of the Void Weaver swarm. Where they touched, the entities came apart. They didn't fight it. Their structured energy lost all coherence, dissolving into harmless static that bled away into the vacuum. The sphere of disruption pushed outward, erasing the swarm layer by layer. It was like watching an ice sculpture melt in fast motion, but in reverse, from complex form into nothing. The wave pushed out and out until it reached its limit and faded. Where 100 Void Weaver entities had been, there was only empty space and the faint, glimmering dust of dissipated energy. The Dauntless was dark and silent, drifting. The bridge was lit only by emergency battery lights. Everyone was holding their breath. On the tactical scanner, Parkmina watched. Nothing moved toward them. The remaining Void Weaver entities on the far side of the system, those feeding on the star, seemed to shudder. Then, as if a switch had been flipped, they disengaged. They fled, flowing back into the deep void from which they came, moving faster than any Concord sensor could track. Swarm is retreating, Mina said, her voice trembling with disbelief. All remaining contacts are exiting the system. Hieron 6 is safe. A moment later, the main power flickered and came back online at minimal levels. Lee Dae-Hyan's exhausted voice came over the comm. We're alive. Barely. Core is intact. We can move in about an hour. The Concord fleet, which had watched the impossible happen, began to broadcast. Not tactical data, but simple, open-channel signals. At first, It was just noise, the triumphant shrieks of Ceridians, the deep, booming horns of the Grovnik. Then it resolved into a cacophony of different languages, all saying the same thing: gratitude, awe. A single official channel opened. It was Archon Vel. He looked at Captain June, his crystalline facets reflecting the distant. "Saved light of Hiron's star, Captain Kim June," he said, his translated voice devoid of its former cold logic, filled instead with something like reverence. "You have done what our combined strength could not. You did not just fight a battle. You ended an extinction." He paused, a significant silence for his species. "The motion of prohibition is hereby rescinded. The Dauntless will not be banned. From this day, it shall be recognized under the Guardian Accord. It will stand as the shield of last resort for the Galactic Concord. A terrible shield, but one we have seen is necessary in a dark universe." June nodded slowly, too tired for triumph. "We accept this role, Archon. Not as masters, as guardians." The channel closed. On the bridge, the crew began to breathe again. They had come to Hieron as the galaxy's most hated weapon. They left as its most feared protector. The weight was still there, heavier than before. But